I booked a corner table at Aurelio's, the small Italian place with the chalkboard menu and the cracked white tiles that Lena used to call romantic in a crooked way. 12 years together, 8 married, and I still arrived early with a gift-wrapped fountain pen in my pocket. I was tracing the hand-painted lemons on the plates when the maitre d' showed her in. She wasn't alone. A tall man walked half a step behind her the way someone does when he isn't sure of the script. He had gym-built shoulders, and the tentative smile of a guest told, "This will be fine," Ethan, Lena said, setting her clutch on the table as if this were any normal evening. "This is Caleb." We shook hands. We sat. The waiter poured water. Lena folded her napkin, looked at it, and then at me. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said using her presentation voice. "I want more room, more experiences. I'm choosing an open marriage." The words were careful, arranged like silverware. I did not knock them over. "Open," I repeated. Caleb cleared his throat. His eyes went to her and back to me. "We didn't want this to be," he began. "Complicated," I said. "Too late." Lena breathed through her nose. "Ethan, this isn't about you failing me. I need freedom. You'll have yours too." I folded my hands. "A few logistics then. Does your freedom include Caleb being our firm's client?" Color moved up her neck. "Don't do this here." "This is the place you chose," I said. "And yes, I recognize him." I nodded to Caleb. "Regional Director, Highline Developments. We signed a 3-year advisory retainer in April. You're on the project calendar as liaison." Caleb shifted chair, scraping tile. "Lena told me you two were separated," he said, quiet. "Paperwork coming." "Separated?" I asked Lena. "Is that why my name is still on the mortgage and both car notes? Is that why payroll still sends your operations coordinator salary from Northlight to our joint account on the 1st of every month?" "I don't want a scene," she said. "You brought an audience," I said, glancing at Caleb. "I brought documentation." I took out my phone, opened the client system. "Since May, you've logged 27 site consultations with Highline, 16 at the Jefferson Hotel, 2 at the Riverstone. Times, dates, expense codes. The receipts went to your corporate card." Caleb rubbed his jaw. "Lena, you said..." "She said a lot of things," I said. "Here's my line." Lena leaned forward. "Ethan, listen. I am still the person you married. Other couples make new rules. Our company already has rules," I said. "Conflict of interest policy. No personal relationships with active clients without disclosure and recusal. You drafted the first version." Her mouth opened, then closed. The waiter hovered and retreated. "Monday morning, I continued. HR will receive a report. Meeting logs, travel reimbursements, messaging, metadata. I'll ask compliance to review your access to Highline files." "You're not firing me at dinner," she said. "We're eating dinner." "Employment happens at the office," I said. "And I won't be the one firing anyone. That's why we have procedures." Caleb stared at the table, then at her. "You told me your husband knew," he said, each word flat. "You said you had an understanding." "I did," she said. "We talked at length." "The only conversation we had this week," I said, "was you asking me to pick up seltzer." "Don't humiliate me," she whispered. "You chose the setting," I said. Caleb pushed back his chair. "I'm not doing this. I'm not risking my job over a lie." Lena caught his sleeve. "Please, we can explain later." "Explain it to HR," he said, freeing his arm. He nodded at me, awkward and brief, then walked out, leaving a scissor cut of air where his chair had been. The restaurant's sound returned, the clink of flatware, the hiss of the espresso machine. Someone at a nearby table pretended to read a menu. Lena stared at the doorway as if Caleb might step back through it if she held the space open long enough. "This is salvageable," she said finally, voice frayed. "Ethan, we can set boundaries. We'll draft them together." "What we had," I said, past tense. Her eyes flashed. "You can't just..." "Follow policy. Protect the firm. Insist that if you want new lives, you don't finance them with mine." I reached for my wallet, then put it away. "The reservation is in your name. The check will be too." "You're punishing me," she said. "I'm using the rules we both agreed to." I stood. "I'm finished subsidizing a conversation you concluded without me." I set the wrapped pen on the napkin. The card said "Happy Anniversary" in my handwriting. I walked past the service station and out to the street. The night had the chill of glass. I waited while the valet fetched the car. Inside the window, Lena was a figure in a mirror held together by posture, not purpose. I did not feel rage, only a dry clarity with no room for argument. The car rolled up. I tipped the valet and slid in. At the light, I watched the restaurant in the rear view until the awning fell out of frame. I drove home through blocks I could steer blind. In the apartment, 2 glasses sat drying on the rack and a drape of Lena's scarf hung from a chair. I put the anniversary trimmings back into their box's ribbon tissue, a box of candles I hadn't opened. It wasn't fury. It was staging, making the room accurate to the evening. My phone buzzed once and went still. I poured water and stood by the sink until the glass emptied. In the study, I opened the file cabinet where we keep our handbooks and contracts. The Northlight policy manual slid out with a soft scrape. I laid it on the desk, open to the section, with Lena's careful formatting her bullet points aligned. I read the first sentence under conflicts of interest aloud, just to hear how it sounded in an empty room. Then I closed the book, set it square with the edge of the desk, and turned off the light. I woke before the alarm light thin at the edges of the blinds. The apartment felt like a waiting room, quiet, arranged, unoccupied, even with me in it. On the kitchen table, I'd left the Northlight policy manual open to the page I'd read aloud the night before. The sentence about refraining from personal entanglements with active clients looked almost ceremonial in its exactness. Rules aren't dramatic. They just sit there until you touch them. I brewed coffee and drafted a timeline on a legal pad. Dates, meeting entries, reimbursements, the hotel stays that had been smuggled into project codes. The numbers behaved better than feelings did. By 7, I'd built a clean packet on my laptop, screenshots from our client system receipts cross-referenced to the corporate card, a short memo summarizing the conflict and the controls we had already violated. I attached the files to a new message and typed the address I knew by muscle memory. Subject: conflict of interest. Highline developments. Employee: L. Vance. I read it twice, removed adjectives, hit send. Northlight's HR director, Anya Patel, replied within 6 minutes, asking if I could step in at 9. She was precise, even in punctuation. I showered, shaved, chose a dark suit I usually saved for board presentations, and left the manual where it lay as if the book were also a witness. The office at that hour had a humming, early shift stillness. Ray, my assistant, was already at her desk with a headset on, pivoting between calendars. She glanced up and then away the way people do when they decide not to ask. I nodded and kept moving. Anya's glass-walled suite looked onto the river. She rose as I entered the meeting, arranged into neat piles on the table, a printed copy of my email, a legal pad, 2 capped pens parallel to each other. "Thanks for coming in promptly," she said. "We'll move carefully and quickly." "I prefer both," I said. She took notes as I talked through the timeline. The April retainer with Highline developments, Lena's role as operations liaison, the first site consultation that had been held at a downtown hotel, and for a few weeks looked like a rounding error in the ledger. When I said the name of the hotel, Anya's pen stopped. "Do you have the originating receipts?" "Here." I slid a folder across. The charges were coded to client stewardship in May, June, and last week. She scanned each page, expression spare. "We'll need access logs from IT," she said. "Device records, messaging metadata headers, not content. Interviews with all parties. If we determine this meets the policy threshold, the formal sequence is prelim report, notice response, decision, documentation. No surprises." "Thank you," I said. The politeness steadied the room. "Ethan." She looked up. "You shouldn't be the one to communicate with the client at this stage. Legal and compliance will handle any outreach. I'm looping them immediately." "That's fine," I said. "I'm trying to keep lanes clean." "Good," she said. "Clean lanes go faster." When I left her office, I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Hale and Mercer. This is Robin," a voice said, bright and crisp. "I need to see Owen today if possible," I said. "Tell him it's Ethan Cole." 5 minutes later, Owen texted me an address 3 blocks from the courthouse and a time that felt like a dare, 10:30. He had left the white shoe firm ages ago, set up his own practice that did only 2 things: employment defense and family law. He used to say that was one thing split at the middle. In his office, he still kept the same crooked photo from our senior year debate tournament. He hugged me in a way that was more bracing than affectionate. "You picked a tight morning," he said. "Sit, talk." I told the story without embellishment, which turned it into a series of planks. Anniversary dinner declaration, the client connection, the logs, the send to HR. While I spoke, he wrote on a yellow pad in a fine, cramped hand, labeling his notes like a map. "Fax policy documents exposure." "Okay," he said, tapping the pen on the last word. First, you did the right thing with HR. Don't talk to the client unless legal asks. Second start, an incident file independent from Northlight's divorce counsel will want clean copies. Third, marital finances. You and Lena have joint accounts. Checking and a home equity line, I said. The mortgage and both car notes are in both names. Her salary hits the joint, checking on the first mine on the 15th. And discretionary spending patterns. I smiled without deciding to. You mean who swipes what? I mean, we'll need to show you've been carrying the big bills, he said. Judges like arithmetic. He flipped the pad. We'll file soon. I want you to start documenting with surgical calm, no editorializing. Screenshot statements the timeline you sent HR. Don't text her. Don't threaten. If communication is necessary, keep it transactional logistics only. If she escalates, I want that too. If there are any joint credit cards you're not using, freeze your access now. Do not lock her out, just protect your exposure. I exhaled. Do you want me to notify her family? I don't want you to notify anyone you emotionally feel like notifying, he said. If there's a strategic reason, we'll talk. Right now, precision beats catharsis. The word precision steadied something in my chest. He gave me a thin folder with templated affidavits and a checklist that read like a spell bank: statements, mortgage coupons, payroll, copies of company policy, calendar entries, expense reports. Call me if anything moves, he said. Who's your HR lead? Patel. He grinned without humor. She's good. She'll run the book the way the book wants to be run. Back at Northlight, it had already set aside a small conference room the staff called the aquarium glass on 3 sides, a door that whistled if you didn't close it in one smooth motion. Jonah from compliance brought his own stack of printouts and a thermos he swore made coffee taste like a lawsuit. He pulled up a timeline on the wall monitor that looked like a heart monitor laid flat bursts of travel bookings logins from a hotel IP messages to a personal email before dawn, followed by calendar entries labeled Highline Site Check. Patterns don't prove intent, Jonah said deadpan, but they draw a chalk outline. We stayed in that room for 2 hours. The quiet interrupted only by printers spitting and Anya stepping in to ask for timestamps or clarify office procedure. At 1 o'clock, she summoned me to her office again. Her legal pad was fuller. Her pens had moved closer to their page as if by gravity. I've completed a preliminary review, she said. I'm not issuing a decision today, but the evidence supports a conflict of interest violation and misuse of company resources. Formal notice this afternoon. We'll invite a written response and a meeting tomorrow. HR will be present. Compliance will be available. If a separation occurs, it will be for cause and we will document. I had spent a career teaching teams to stop saying we when they meant I. It struck me then that Anya never used either. The process spoke for itself. Understood, I said. Do you need me in the room with Lena? No, she said. For everyone's sake. On my way back to my office, I passed 2 associates divvying up a conference room's worth of files. Their conversation lowered as I approached, then rose again in an imitation of normal. Rumor is a solvent. It gets into drywall. I closed my door and sat at the small round table I almost never used. The city's noise came up through the windows like air through a grate, buses' sirens, a whistle. That was probably just a distant truck reversing. At 2:30, Ray knocked and slid a paper across the threshold without quite entering. From HR, she said softly. The top page was a formal notice to Lena preliminary findings. Invitation to respond. A request to return her access card at day's end pending the meeting. Below it, my copy of the meeting schedule. I answered 2 client emails about unrelated projects and felt grateful for the clean math of other people's problems. At 4:10, Anya called. We've served notice. She signed receipt. The meeting is at 9 tomorrow. She paused. She asked if you would be present. And I said no, Anya said. It's an HR matter. Thank you. Ethan, she added, voice level. Security knows to be present outside the conference room. Routine. Of course, I said, even though we both knew nothing about today was routine. I stayed until after 6, then drove home on autopilot. The policy manual was still open on the kitchen table where I'd left it, corners curled a little from the humidity. I closed it carefully the way you put a bandage back into its gauze envelope. My phone buzzed twice while I was boiling pasta and not looking at it. When I did look, there were 3 messages from numbers I didn't recognize and one from Lena with no words, just an audio attachment I didn't open. I slept like someone whose window latch had been fixed, not well exactly, but without the irritating rattle. Morning brought rain and with it the skyscraper smell of wet stone. I wore the same dark suit and took the elevator straight to HR. Anya had arranged the conference room with her usual geometry. 3 chairs on one side, 2 on the other, a carafe of water, centered as if it were an exhibit. Jonah sat to my left, his thermos like a totem. On the other side, 2 empty chairs waited. Lena entered at 9:02 a minute behind a man I didn't know who introduced himself as her counsel, Mr. Braun. He carried a leather folder that looked as if it had never been used for anything urgent. Lena's hair was pulled back, the style she wore when she wanted to look like a solution. Ms. Patel, Braun said pleasantly, "We'll keep this brief. My client is prepared to explain. This is your client's opportunity to respond to preliminary findings," Anya said. "We will ask clarifying questions. Then HR will deliberate." Lena looked at me and then not at me. There was no intent to misuse company resources, she began. Those hotel meetings were for privacy and efficiency. Highline's offices are a 40-minute drive with construction traffic and the Jefferson is centrally located. Caleb, Mr. Hart, preferred it. The receipts were coded incorrectly but under a general client stewardship category. It wasn't deceit, it was expedience. Anya's pen moved steadily. Why were several meetings labeled site consultation held off-site at a hotel? Because we discussed strategic site matters in a quiet environment, Lena said. Conference rooms were not available at Northlight those days. Did you disclose a personal relationship with Mr. Hart? Anya asked. Lena's mouth tightened. There was no personal relationship that affected my impartiality. Jonah lifted a sheet. We have booking records showing your stay at the Jefferson overlapping with 3 of those meeting times. Lena's eyes flashed in a way I recognized from arguments about nothing at all dishes, laundry, the right way to fold shirts. I sometimes used a room as a day office, she said. I had migraines. Harsh lighting in our downtown conference rooms triggers them. Anya's pen stopped. Do you have a medical accommodation request on file? Lena didn't answer. Braun interjected quickly. Medical issues can be documented if necessary. The core point is that no client harm occurred. Highline signed deliverables on time. The retainer is in good standing. The policy forbids personal entanglements that create bias. My client is saying there was no such bias. Anya nodded. Thank you. She set down her pen and folded her hands, a deliberate pause, settling over the table like dust. We appreciate your response. When they left, Jonah exhaled in a slow line. I'd say that went exactly as we expected, he said, and then apologized as if expectations were impolite. At 10:30, Anya sent a calendar ping decision meeting, L. Vance, 3:00 p.m. I answered email, reviewed a pitch deck, sipped bad coffee, and better water. At noon, I walked a circle around the block in the rain without an umbrella, the way you do when you don't want to be recognized by yourself in reflective glass. At 1:50, as I was toweling my hair in my office, my door opened without a knock. Lena closed it behind her and stood with her back to it as if someone might try to come in after her. You sicked HR on me, she said, voice flat. HR exists, I said. I used it. I can fix this, she said quickly. I can recuse myself from Highline, take a leave, write an apology. We don't have to burn everything. I'm not burning anything, I said. I'm naming the things you already set on fire. She flinched. Ethan, please, we can set rules. People do. People do when both people keep them, I said. What you want is a retrospective permission slip. That isn't a rule, that's a story. Don't talk to me like a client, she said, and the words came out bright with old familiarity. Talk to me like your wife. I looked at her, and the word felt like a jacket worn past its season. Saturday ended, that I said. You ended that. She pressed her lips together until the color thinned. Caleb has nothing to do with this anymore, she said, and looked surprised to hear herself admit it. He panicked. He's not important. We are. I didn't answer. She walked to the window and touched the glass as if the river were warm. You always plan, she said. You make lists. You draw boxes around problems until they're smaller. You're doing it to me. I'm doing it to me, I said. I'm putting my life back into its box. We stood like that for a long 10 seconds, the city making its own argument beyond the glass rain stitching it together. There was a knock. Ray's voice through the door. Ethan, Ms. Patel asked me to make sure you're on your way. Lena wiped under one eye with a thumb she tried to make look casual. I'll fight it, she said softly. Not to me, but to the room. If they fire me, I'll fight. That's your right, I said. She opened the door and left without looking back. I waited until her steps were gone, then followed in the opposite direction. At 3, the conference room held the same arrangement as before, but felt heavier. Anya began with the sentence I had known was coming since the moment I hit send that morning. Based on our investigation, she said Northlight has determined that Ms. Vance violated our conflict of interest policy and misused company resources. Effective today, Northlight is ending her employment for cause. The company will provide a separation letter detailing property return procedures, benefits information, and the appeal process available under our handbook. Braun asked for the letter. Lena's face was set in a professional neutrality so careful it was almost luminous. Anya continued through the steps without affect final paycheck timing. Cobra noticed the ban on contacting Northlight clients for a defined period as provided in her contract. Security would collect her badge and laptop after the meeting. She would be allowed to pack personal items under supervision this afternoon or schedule a pickup later. Northlight appreciates Ms. Vance's contributions to several projects Anya concluded, and even that sentence sounded like a filing. We left the room in 2 streams. In the hallway, Lena caught my sleeve the way she had caught Caleb's arm in the restaurant, light but insistent. One question she said, voice almost clinical. Is there anything I can say that changes you? No, I said. Her hand fell away. Back in my office, I closed the door and sat in the chair behind my desk instead of the round table. The river kept moving. The rain had thinned to a mist that looked good on architecture and bad on moods. At 4:05, Anya called to confirm that Lena had turned in her credentials and left the building quietly. Documentation will follow, she said. You'll receive copies for your records. Thank you, I said. The phrase felt both inadequate and exactly right. The office settled itself. Phones rang for reasons unrelated to me. Someone laughed down the hall and caught it before it got too loud. I cleared my inbox until the top of the screen looked like a blank sheet, and then closed my laptop. At the elevator, Ray handed me an envelope. This came up from security, she said. I think it's yours. Inside was Lena's access badge, the glossy plastic worm from someone else's hand. For a second, I had the impulse to put it in a drawer the way you do with things you haven't decided to throw away. Instead, I placed it on HR's Dropbox and let it slide out of sight. On the sidewalk, the rain finally stopped. Streetlights flicked on before the sky had quite earned them, and the river took them like coins. I walked to my car without hurry. The seat remembered my shape. I drove home by a route I didn't usually take and didn't turn on the radio. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and paper. On the kitchen table, the manual was closed. I left it that way. By Friday, the rain had cleared to a rinsed blue. Owen filed in family court at 8:30, and we took the elevator to the 6th floor with a pair of contractors arguing amiably about rebar. The corridor smelled like copier toner and coffee left on a burner. Our hearing was set for 9:15. The docket moved with the clean, impersonal rhythm of a warehouse line. Inside, the judge read from a tablet and barely looked up. Owen spoke in the calm cadence of someone assembling a shelf by following the diagram, joint checking figures, mortgage coupons, Lena's direct deposit dates, a month-by-month ledger of who paid what. The judge asked 3 questions each, no longer than a sentence, then issued temporary orders in a tone that made them sound almost ordinary. Maintain the status quo on the mortgage and utilities. No withdrawals over a set threshold from joint accounts without mutual consent. No disposal or concealment of major assets. Preserve records. Counsel will prepare a short form, she said, already scrolling to the next case. Effective upon entry. On the steps afterward, Owen tucked the stamped order into a neutral gray folder. You've got guardrails, he said. That's what this is. Guardrails hold, I said. Unless you aim for them. He looked at me over the top of the folder. Don't aim for anything today. Back at Northlight, the office had that end-of-week mix of fatigue and manufacture. The printer's soft frenzy, the coffee that tasted like a deadline's second draft. I answered emails I could answer and set reminders for the ones I couldn't. At 11, Ray buzzed. Someone's here to see you, she said. She says she's family. The woman in the waiting area stood as I came out. She wore travel sneakers with a black blazer, the compromise of someone who walked fast but wanted to be taken seriously. Ethan, she said. I'm Tess Ward. Lena's cousin. We sat in my office with the door half closed, a posture that felt accurate. She took a breath, the way people do when they'd practiced a speech on a plane and were deciding whether to use it. "I flew in from Tucson," she said. "Lena called me last night. She said you were smearing her at work and stealing money." I held her gaze. "I'm not doing either." "I know," Tess said, and the answer landed with more force than if she'd said anything longer. She slid her phone across the table. On the screen, Lena's post from the night before, black background, white text, the grammar of grievance. Words like controlling and abusive and retaliation, followed by comments from faces I didn't recognize but whose punctuation I could have predicted. "I commented," Tess said. "I asked for specifics. She blocked me." Tess put the phone away. "When we were kids, my aunt and uncle had a rule: if you're going to accuse, you better be able to diagram the sentence. Lena never could. She just changes the nouns." I didn't smile. "Why are you here?" "Because my aunt and uncle will believe the last person who sounded certain," she said. "For years, that was Lena. I'm trying to change the acoustics," she exhaled. "Also because she's spiraling. When she spirals, she invents collisions and then insists someone pushed her. You shouldn't be surprised by accusations. She's used them to fix other messes." The room was very quiet for a moment, except for the river making its constant, indifferent argument beyond the glass. "Tess, I said what happens to people who try to fix her messes. They become part of the mess," she said. "Or they back away so fast they leave vapor trails." She put a card on my table. A Tucson attorney's name, a number, a spare logo. "If she makes noise out where I live, call him. He's swift." "Thank you," I said. The words felt utilitarian, but that seemed appropriate. She stood to go. "Also," she said at the door, "I'm sorry for the part where she made you feel like you were being cruel for establishing a boundary. She does that. Don't let her turn your no into a confession." When she left, I wrote her name on my legal pad and drew a small square beside it. I didn't check it off. At 1:30, the certified letter arrived at reception and rode the internal mail chute like a message in a pneumatic tube. The envelope was thick and disapproving. The letterhead said Braun and Keller, LLP, Employment and Civil Rights. The tone was measured in centimeters of outrage. It accused Northlight of retaliatory discharge, hostile environment, and gender-based discrimination. It accused me personally of sexual coercion under color of managerial authority, a phrase that read like someone had assembled it from a drawer of worst-case words. The letter demanded immediate reinstatement back pay and a public retraction of defamatory insinuations. It gave a deadline and a promise of litigation if the world was not duly restored. I read it twice and felt nothing that resembled surprise. Then I scanned it to Owen and called him. "I've got a demand from Braun," I said. "Of course you do," Owen said. "Forward then, stay off email for 20 minutes. I want a draft from a clear sheet." 20 minutes later, he called back, voice even. "We'll respond with the facts." The conflict of interest policy. Lena wrote her own name under the hotel stays coded to client accounts, the IT logs, the HR record that shows a compliant process that predates any demand letter. "We'll give them a short rope. If they tug, we have defamation exposure to discuss." I looked at the window at the long, slow steel of the bridge. "She's calling this coercion." "She can call it choreography," Owen said. "Words are not proof. You have proof." He paused. "And Ethan? Don't call her parents yet." "Her cousin already called on her own," I said. "Tess, Tucson. Cousins have their own rules," he said. "Parents are another theater." At 3, Ray knocked again, a rhythm softened to politeness. "Client calls for you," she said. "2 of them. Not about work." She handed me a list she'd already labeled because she likes order in a world that resists it. Highline Development's office manager, Renata Hall. Rookwell Manufacturing, COO, David Chong. Beacon Partners, Principal Imani Clark. Renata went first. "Mr. Cole," she said businesslike. "Ms. Vance called twice today. She suggested the partnership with Northlight was compromised that we should reconsider. Caleb asked me to reach out directly so there's no triangular misunderstanding. We enjoyed working with your team. If there are staffing changes, we can adjust schedules. We aren't reconsidering the relationship because of anyone's personal life." "Thank you," I said. The words again felt exactly the size required. David Chong was drier. "We got a voicemail," he said. "Said you were retaliating against your wife and that our account was next if we didn't pick a side." We don't pick sides. We pick invoices and performance. Consider yourself notified as friends that she's making calls." Imani was brief. "We're fine here," she said. "We're staying fine. Do what you need to do." After the third call, I sat for a long minute and watched a tug push a long, dumb barge upstream like a parent coaxing a toddler across a street. Then I emailed Anya and Jonah the summaries and times. Anya called within 5 minutes. "We'll memorialize," she said. "Client interference turns this from HR to legal with a different color of highlighter. Owen can handle the family court, we'll handle the business side. I recommend an application for injunctive relief, narrowly tailored, time-limited, specific to client contact and workplace access." How fast, I asked. "Tomorrow, if we like," Anya said. But courts are more generous with emergencies when there has been an attempt at informal containment. I'll send counsel a cease and desist tonight and copy Braun. If the calls continue, we go to a judge. "They will continue," I said. "I appreciate your confidence in the predictability of human behavior," she said. "Forward. Any new reports to legal. Not to me directly. We'll build the log." At 6:30, I turned off my monitor and sat with the residual glow on the screen, the way you sit with the image of a room after you've turned off the light. The apartment felt unfamiliar when I unlocked it, like a hotel I'd stayed in long enough to know the exact height of the shower handle. The manual on the table stayed closed. I ate standing-up pasta again out of convenience or superstition and fell asleep on the couch with the television muted to a storm report somewhere else. Saturday passed without contact, which felt like a trick. Sunday afternoon, I changed shirts twice, then dialed a number I only called on holidays. Marian answered on the second ring. Her voice had the quiver it always had when she first picked up, like she'd been running to the phone even when it sat in her lap. "Ethan," she said the name like a period. "How are you? I'm calling because I wanted you to hear something from me," I said. "Lena and I are in divorce proceedings. There's a temporary order. I'm trying to keep things civil and documented." There was the kind of silence a phone doesn't like to transmit. It makes a noise of it anyway. "I know," she said at last. "She called me. She said things I didn't recognize as this house. Peter and we are trying not to say the wrong words." She drew breath. "I'm sorry." Peter came on the line with a breath like a door. "Ethan," he said the name like a handshake. "We're aware it's bad. We're sorry for our part in believing the song when we should have checked the sheet music." "You didn't have a reason to check," I said, which was kind and true in the way truth sometimes lands as a compromise. "We won't be enabling anything," he said. We told her that. We told her if she wants us to answer the phone, she has to do the work that makes phones reasonable again. He cleared his throat quietly. "Do you need anything from us?" "Only this," I said. "If she says I'm calling to make things worse, know that I am not calling at all." "We hear you," he said. "We'd like to hear you again sometime when it's not a courtroom echo." We said goodbye with the gracelessness of people leaving a porch before the conversation was absolutely over. Monday returned the building to its routines. At 10, Anya forwarded me the cease and desist she'd sent to Braun regarding client contact. At noon, Renata from Highline left a message Lena had called again. At 1, David from Rookwell emailed an audio file of a voicemail that sounded like it had been recorded in a moving car. At 2, Owen texted 4:30 p.m. Deputy 12 emergency motion for temporary injunctive relief. Deputy 12 had the impatient carpet of a room that changed uses 3 times a day. Opposing counsel was a younger associate from Braun's shop with a tie that refused to lie flat. Lena did not appear. Anya sat 2 chairs over from me, a stack of exhibits arranged by tabs and subtabs that would have made a librarian weep with respect. Owen argued crisply the employment matter had been concluded under policy. Since then, Ms. Vance had contacted multiple Northlight clients with allegations designed to interfere with existing relationships. Northlight sought a narrow order restraining contact with Northlight clients and access to Northlight premises for a limited period. Braun's associate tried outrage in a smaller key. "She's exercising speech," he said. "She's calling friends. She's calling business contacts of a company that no longer employs her," Owen said. "The First Amendment has never loved that set of nouns." The judge, a thin man with a tendency to look over his glasses as if they were binoculars, asked for specifics. Anya supplied dates, times, phone logs, summaries, the cease and desist. The judge read in silence, and then spoke in the same measured tone I had heard in family court the voice officers use at parades. "Northlight's motion is granted," he said. He set the boundaries like stakes in the ground: no client contact, no entry to Northlight premises, no communication directed at Northlight personnel outside council-to-council channels, effective upon service, violation subject to contempt. He set a review date. He did not look at me or at anyone with interest. He was the kind of man for whom interest was an indulgence. Back in the corridor, Owen shook my hand in a way that was really a transfer of temperature. "You're insulated," he said. "From the wind," I said, "not the weather." He didn't argue. Good lawyers save their corrections. We parted on the courthouse steps. I walked down to the river and watched the afternoon freight pass containers stacked like seagoing neighborhoods. When I got back to the office, Ray pointed to my phone as if it were a creature that might still be alive. "Your father-in-law called," she said, blinking at the phrase she had never had to say before and might not have to again. He left a message. I called Peter from the aquarium, the small conference room where voices feel contained. He answered on the first ring. "She's angry," he said. "She says you put a gag on her." "She's not gagged," I said. "She just can't call my clients." I told her we weren't going to pick up calls where the first sentence is an accusation, he said. She hung up. "We're going to stop saving her from the quiet that follows." "Thank you," I said, and meant it more than I meant most sentences that day. At 6, as I was putting on my coat, Owen called again. "Braun reached out," he said without introduction. "He wants to talk settlement. Tomorrow morning, 10. What shift did I asked, though I knew the answer. "A judge and some parents," he said, "plus the reality of hourly rates. Expect something recognizable." "Understood," I said. I walked out into a city that had put its lights on early. The river took them and made them longer. I crossed the street at the signal, an obedience that felt less like submission than like a kind of reclaiming my steps regular. The guardrails in place, the lane ahead clear enough to move in. The next morning at 10, we sat across a walnut table that had seen its share of endings. Owen's conference room was set the way he liked it, water at each place pad squared to the edge, the windows framing a slice of river like an exhibit. Braun arrived with a junior and a folder thick enough to look important. Lena came last, a minute behind, eyes polished into neutrality. Owen opened without throat clearing. "Northlight's employment matter is closed. There's a temporary restraining order in place regarding client contact and premises. Family Court has issued asset preservation orders. We're here